Kimberly-Clark, manufacturers of brands like Kleenex, Huggies and Baby Soft, has shown resilience in the local South African market in spite of the recession and subsequent lackluster return to growth. Earlier, Samantha Loring spoke to Tony Palmer, Senior Vice President at Kimberly-Clark, and asked him about the defensive nature of the consumer goods division.
I think for a start it goes back to the actual portfolio we have, and globally as we think about what Kimberly-Clark stands for in our vision, it's essentials for a better life, or leading the world in essentials for a better life. And we define essentials as those things that once you have them and the consumer has them, the thought of taking them away is too horrible to contemplate. So you think of things like feminine care products or disposable diapers or and those sort of products. You think about those, taking those away and living without them once you've got them is a horrible thing. So, and they're also relatively affordable, so they're affordable luxuries in a lot of ways. And as you get into emerging markets, they certainly are luxuries, but when people have them, they become essential. So I think the type of portfolio really lends itself to being resilient in difficult times.
It's almost like a defensive type of product. You've been investing quite significantly in local manufacturing in South Africa. You clearly see opportunities for growth in the local market.
Absolutely, and I think not only investing in manufacturing, but to your first question, the other reason why we've been relatively resilient is we've continued to invest in our brands and our portfolio, and that then leads into investment in manufacturing and supply chain. So over the last 3 years in South Africa, we've invested about $100 million in capital to supply the demand that we've generated through that marketing investment in the consumer and the customer. And I think actually, I visited our plant in Cape Town this week, and we're right now investing about another $35 million and employing an extra 50 people in Cape Town itself to supply the South African market.
What is your assessment of where the South African consumer is at this point in time? Obviously, that's a very broad definition of the South African consumer, because we do have the upper end and of course a huge middle class and then the lower end of the market. But what is your overall assessment?
Yeah, I think the South African consumer is not that, at a macro perspective, I think is not that different to consumers around the world. Obviously there are cultural differences and so forth, but they see the same things that consumers do all around the world, which is not huge growth in income levels, uncertainty in the economy. The thing that's unique about South Africa, I think, which is probably my biggest concern for South Africa in the future, is enormous youth unemployment. So, South African youth unemployment is 50%, people 15 to 24. If you go to the sub-Sahara, it's more like 10 or 11%. Globally, it's 13%. And the paradox in that is there's still a war for talent, and it's very hard to find really good talent, although South Africa does have a good talent pool, yet there's this enormous underemployed youth.
So that highly skilled gap is what you're battling with here.
Yeah, and I think, and that then knocks on to the consumer and sort of a bifurcation of the economy where you'd say, yes, it's right. South Africa is an emerging market in some senses, but it's actually quite a sophisticated market in another. So, and there's, from a business perspective, there's quite a lot of, there's data here as there would be in a developed market, yet there's this penetration opportunity of an emerging market. So it's interesting. And I think a huge opportunity for South Africa is using that unique nature of South Africa, both to build the economy here, but also to supply services and support into the sub-Sahara in Africa, which is a great opportunity, I think, for South Africa.
Let's talk about Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, because you have some ambitious targets there when it comes to revenue targets. Turnover of $250 million is what it stands at. You're targeting $1 billion by 2015. That's a fourfold increase in 4 years. How do you intend to achieve that?
Yeah, I think simply we have a very good, strong base in our South African business, and we have very strong brands that really do, as I said earlier about the portfolio, target essentials for a better life for people. So we are at the entry point of consumption for consumers as they start to have more wealth. So I think our range like Huggies and diapers, as people do have more discretionary income, they're very excited to spend money on a newborn. It's an obvious place for them to spend any discretionary income they have. Similarly, feminine care products and the comfort that brings. So I think the portfolio is perfectly situated
So
to
the
drive.
economies where you're seeing the fastest growth?
Where we're seeing the fastest growth in GDP per capita is probably the best way to think about it. And I think where the infrastructure lends itself to being able to service those consumers, and that's sort of where we'd be targeting, obviously.
What is your current presence in Africa?
We have a relatively minimal presence in Africa, to be honest, in the sub-Saharan. I think that's the enormous opportunity for us, and we look at it and say, and we generally deal through distributors, and we've been learning, spent the last few years learning about how to do business there, and I think now the opportunity, we're very committed to building a business there and an infrastructure there, because if you step back and look at the bigger picture, it's one of the very few areas of the world with a demographic that is looking towards a positive trend, with a youthful demographic, with a growing population of people working, as opposed to other parts of the world with an older demographic, with a smaller population working, supporting a larger population of older demographic. So it's a huge long-term growth opportunity.